next guest seemed to have it all. A favourite to win Big Brother and an incredible television career. But then it all came crashing down. We'll talk to Ben Zabel shortly, but first, a look at his story.
He was the Big Brother housemate who won our hearts. A self-proclaimed social recluse, Ben Zabel rose to fame as the favourite to win the reality show. With brown glasses, quirky pyjamas and a lovable personality, Ben kept the audience tuning in night after night as his fan base skyrocketed.
It's time to go, Ben!
But after his surprise elimination, Ben got a gig in the media. Things were looking bright for this rising star until just a few weeks ago. So what made this happy-go-lucky guy try to take his own life? It's the issue we rarely talk about, but now Ben joins us exclusively on Studio 10 to help smash this stigma.
Ben, welcome to Studio 10.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
The first question I have to ask is, how are you doing at the moment?
I'm doing better. It's been a really busy the last few weeks, and to be honest, I'm not going to come out here and say I'm fine, everything is great, you know, because it's not. But things are better for me than they were. I think a lot of the time, you know, when you have depression and anxiety, I've been getting a lot of messages with people saying, "How are you? Are you all good now? Are you better?" Like, you sort of just have to have like plenty of fluids and a lie down, and you'll be all
If
good.
only it was so simple, hey?
You know, so I'm managing better.
And
Yeah.
tell me something.
Yeah.
Knowing your mental health was fragile, why did you go and take part in Big Brother?
It's so. I wish I had a really good story, but I didn't mean to end up on the show. It was kind of an accident. So.
And I love that you snore.
I know. So what happened was, at the time, I was currently unemployed. I'd actually lost my previous job due to admitting that my sick days were part and parcel due to panic attacks and depression. So a friend of mine had called me and said that there were auditions for Big Brother at a hotel that was down the end of my street. And I found out that that hotel was where my school formal was held in 1999. And it just had really good memories for me. Had a great risotto there. And
A risotto at school?
At the formal.
Oh.
Yeah, and I sort of thought, I'll pop down there, and I don't want to act too naive, like I didn't know that I was going to audition and all. I knew that was part and parcel, but I thought I'll go down there because it would bit of nostalgia. And I made sure I went down there late in the afternoon when all the tryhards and the wannabes who had camped out had all gone home. And I even went down there after all the news cameras had gone because I didn't want to have to wave on the news and say I'm at the auditions. I was too embarrassed. And so I went in to the audition and I just wanted to take some photos of the room, and they were like, you know, can you bark like a dog, can you roll on the ground? And I was like, oh no, I'm too embarrassed to do all that. And then I just ended up on the show.
And we watched your journey,
Yeah.
and then you emerged. And what did you feel after you'd been in the house and you emerged? Was it a wonderful experience? Did you enjoy it? Did you feel loved?
Yeah, look, people will come up to me and they'll say, oh, I love you. And I'm so glad that I went through the experience at 32 and not 22, because I understand that what they love is what I'm portraying or just how much that they see. But I understand that they appreciate me. I was very fortunate that when I left the show that I was well received and well thought of, and I was grateful for that. Keeping in mind, I was very mindful when I was in the house that I was representing my mum and my family, and I wanted to do them proud of myself. But what felt great was that, and I have watched some of the series back just a little bit, like you see me eat and dribble and fart and sleep and all these awful things and cry, and people still liked me despite all of that.
First day.
So I felt a great sense of acceptance.
So you were on top of the world, really, weren't you? So where did it start to go wrong?
Look, what really triggered it, I think, for me, and I've had to think a lot about this, because when you get depressed and anxious, you know, obviously you want to get help and you know, with whatever form that may come, but you want to kind of analyse what are the triggers or what started it. And I think for me, ironically, it was actually dealing with people liking me. Isn't that a strange thing to say?
Do you think, though, that was perhaps because you put so much pressure on yourself, and so you think if people like me, then I need to be a certain way and perhaps I'm not good enough?
Look, I used to ring my mum all the time, a few times a day, and I'd say to Mum, you know, I really feel like a fraud.
Did you feel guilty?
I felt like I didn't deserve it because, as I said, and I know the story I told about auditioning kind of sounds a bit odd, but I didn't mean to get on the show, and then I got on the show, and I was on the show from July through into October, and then when I left and I had all of this, you know, really marvellous, you know, beautiful attention, I felt very undeserving of that. And I felt a tremendous amount of guilt for that.
But the thing is, it's interesting, isn't it, I think, mental illness, because having been there as well myself, it's very difficult to separate from realising it is an illness.
Yes.
It's nothing that you've actually either brought on yourself,
yes,
or that you deserve to feel a particular way.
But is it common, Jess, for people with mental illness? Is it something you felt, because clearly Ben did, that you shouldn't be loved?
Well, I don't know about shouldn't be loved, but it's almost, I think, it's a sense of there's an expectation that you have to be a particular way.
Yes.
And I think all of us put on masks.
Yes.
And ways of, like you were saying at the start, that if, you know, people say to you, how are you? And you go, oh, I'm good, I'm great, when in fact you're really struggling behind that mask. And I wonder too, I think why people love you is because you normalise something for people that a lot of people feel they have to hide away and can't actually say, you know what, I have an illness and I need help, but there's nothing to be ashamed of.
Yeah, and we're just going to take a really, really short break, but I want to talk to you after the break, OK?
OK, Tara.
Now, after the break, Ben tells us about the night he actually tried to take his own life and his challenging road to recovery. You're watching Studio 10. Welcome back to Studio 10. Now, before the break, you were talking with former Big Brother housemate and TV personality Ben Zabel about his battle with mental illness. Now, Ben, we were talking about before about how you were feeling. Now, we want to talk about suicide because it is an issue that affects so many people in Australia. Last week, a 10-year-old took their own life. We need to start talking about it. In rural Australia, many people are taking their lives. So you want to help others. Take us through the night that you tried to take your own life, at what point you were mentally.
You know, it had been a day that had been pretty much like any other day. I think a lot of the time when we think of suicide, I know from me, I've learned a lot about life through television and movies. And you kind of think about writing the note, putting on your nicest outfit and all of that sort of thing. But it wasn't a premeditated, well thought out thing. It was just an overwhelming feeling of darkness and of despair. And I couldn't imagine a future that had me in it. And I was alone and I was home. And I know people think, why not call someone? You don't feel like it. And that's why you constantly tell people who are depressed and anxious that you need to reach out. But a lot of the time, if you have an illness or perhaps even an addiction, the last thing you want is help. It's very hard to be reached. So I was home and I was alone and I just needed some relief. So I just took my prescribed medication as per the dosage. But it wasn't enough. I was still hurting. I was still in pain. So then I just took some more. And obviously then I took a dose that was not the prescribed amount, and that led to me going unconscious. And I'm very fortunate in hindsight that when I was in that state, someone had just sent a text, just a social text, and I had been conscious enough to reply, but had just written MLP, ABC, like I hadn't made any sense. And they knew that there was something drastically wrong because I don't drink, thankfully. And then, you know, the paramedics were called. But it wasn't a cry for help. I'd like to say that it was just my way of trying to get people to talk about it. No, it was intentional. And I was taken to hospital and I was there for quite some time. was a very serious incident. It's funny, a lot of the time we don't like to even say the word suicide attempt. I think my mum called it a bad day. The general public have lovingly referred to it as a bit of a hiccup. I think Nana referred to it as I had a bad turn.
And
And
the point I think that you make there too is that it is serious and it is something that we need to treat seriously.
Yeah.
And people need to realise, and I'm really interested how, because you're obviously very unwell to be in that particular headspace, how are you going now? And are you getting the necessary support and care around you? Because I think that's so important, that you feel that there is a safety net around you.
I mean, it takes a village. You can't do it on your own. It'd be a bit like, you know, if you had any other illness, you couldn't cure it or maintain it on your own. You would need healthcare professionals. You know, you would need medication or whatever. So I'm certainly getting the care that I need, both on an emotional front and also on a medical front as well. And in a way, just in being here, this is therapy for me too.
Well, you know what? I'm such a big believer in sharing our experiences, because you have touched so many people who are going through a similar situation or might be in that same headspace.
So many people.
What would you say to people who will be listening to your story thinking, how can I get through this? Where is the way through?
Look, what I would say is whatever you're feeling now is temporary, but what you will do to yourself through self-harm or an intentional suicide attempt is a permanent decision. And I know we hear that all the time, but that's true. I'd really like to talk to the families and the carers of those people, because a lot of the time, if you're the depressed person or the anxious person, you don't necessarily want to ask for help for yourself. So I would say to those carers who know people, if you can try and motivate them somehow to seek help. You know, I always say, go to your GP, go to God, go to a buffet, go somewhere, do something. Just try and get out of your bubble and talk.
And there's just something I'm just trying to get my head around. When you talked about feeling of despair and the depression and easing the pain, can you describe that pain? I mean, what do you mean? What is that feeling that overwhelms you? Because it seems to me that's the thing we need to understand in order to help.
You know, I think we take it for granted that when we go through life that we feel happy, we feel sad, we feel excited, we feel nervous, we feel vulnerable. You know, we're sensitive. For me, and I just talking for myself, I always thought that depression meant that you were unhappy. I'm actually quite a happy, chatty person, but with my depression, I have an absence of feeling. And I've spoken to someone recently via social media who does sort of self-harm themselves, and I found that very interesting, and I said, why do you do that? And they said, because it makes me feel something. So when I have despair, it's because I just don't feel any joy. Imagine going through life and you just feel nothing. Life is numb. And the days suddenly seem a lot longer if you don't feel sleepy, or if you don't feel happy, or if you don't enjoy eating, or if you know, there's no joy, you know.
Ben, as in the media, often we weren't allowed to report suicide because there were concerns that it would spark copycats.
Yeah.
But the issue that I have is it's such a huge problem in this country that we need to start talking about it. It needs to be part of the national conversation. How are you going to help people? As I mentioned earlier, a 10-year-old has taken their own life.
I mean, that's unbelievable.
So how do we stop it?
You have to start talking. I mean, I know with magazines, we're very reticent to write anything that had to do with suicide, but they're quite happy to sort of, you know, make up stories that are fun and fluffy, but this is real life and they tend to stay away. So how can we try and make a change, and how can I try and make a difference? I think just by talking is helping. I did, you know, an Instagram post and stuff like that just to kind of say, this is where I'm at. You might think that I get to play on the television or wear a nice suit that I borrow, but I too am feeling maybe just as low as you are in whatever circumstances you're living in. And you know, I've been depressed and anxious all my life, And it didn't matter whether you're on a TV show or...
Doesn't discriminate. Mental illness does not discriminate. It
You know,
touches all of us in some way or other,
It's a
doesn't
big
it?
club,
Yes.
and everyone's invited, but
Yeah.
you don't want to join. You don't want to join.
You know what, though? I'm
Yeah.
proud to be part of the same club as you.
Yeah,
I
thank
am.
you.
I really am. You also, at the moment, apart from doing this incredible advocacy work that you're doing by sharing your story, you're working on a show.
I know.
Tell us just, what's that? What's that about?
Oh, God, knowing my luck, it's going to be a success. I know. I went to my... I was talking to my GP and she's like, your anxiety must be better because, you know, you're going on Studio 10 and you're doing this show. I'm like...
Well, what sort of a show is it? I mean, is it song and dance man? Tap dancing? What are you going to do?
Well, it's just talking. I mean, I can do this stuff okay. It's life that I struggle with. Do you know what I mean? Yes. Do you know what I mean?
You know what they say, Ben? The whole world's a stage.
Yes.
Just think of it that way.
Yeah. Well, so I'm doing a show where I'm just talking about the reality of reality television because everyone says they don't watch it, but we know with commercial TV that if it doesn't rate and it doesn't make money, it won't get put back on. So it's everywhere. So the show's just me talking about the ins and the outs of it and just sort of talking about the selfie phenomena and having my picture taken at Woolworths and the dry cleaners and the ATM and, you know, yeah.
Well, when you've got it ready, maybe you'll come back and give us a sneak peek.
Yes. Big round of applause. Ben, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For having the courage to come and share your story and to make a difference to other Australians. Thank you very much, Ben.
It's a tough topic and thanks for, you know, having the conversation with me. I tried my best to kind of explain myself.
And if you or anyone you know is battling mental illness or need any help, you can call a really important organisation, that is Lifeline. Their number is 131114 or Beyond Blue on 1300 22 4636. Those numbers are manned 24 hours a day.